I wrote a children's book for my senior presentation. And my essential question, which was changed, is how will writing a picture book help me to work collaboratively and productively with others? So the whole journey was a bit weird. I had no idea what I was going to do because I'm a junior and I wasn't really thinking about my Senior X project until it just sort of came upon me. So, and then a lot of other people did, so I was a little scared, but I was given a lot of ideas, especially from Miss Dillon, and one of them was cake decorating, but I couldn't do that, so I decided to write a children's book. First because I love to read and I love to write, and I'd never done anything like this before, so there was definitely something I could learn. And there was a mentor who could meet with me with my special times and schedule, because I live on an island, so getting here and meeting with somebody is a little bit harder than it should be. So Carrie was a very good mentor. And a children's picture book would take less time than a book like Charlotte's Web, which is still a children's book, but would be longer. So I had very, very little prior knowledge. I had written little books in kindergarten that my teacher had published, which I actually got to look over, and they were really dumb, but they were really cute. And I had written a book in 8th grade, but it was more of an art project than a writing project. So I hadn't really done anything like this. And I love reading them because they're all really cute. So yeah, that's it. Carrie Jones, who's in the back, was my mentor. And she was recommended by Miss Dillon. And she has written a lot of really good books and lives right here on MDI. And my favorite book of hers is Girl Hero. And she's written a whole bunch of other series, including children's books. She's written mostly young adult books. So it was a little bit different than what I did, but it still helped. She still helped a whole lot. So some of my challenges, which I came up before even meeting with my mentor the first time. I was really scared of morals and trying to come up with a moral first and then fit it into, and then build the story around it. And that isn't really what I was supposed to do. And then beginning, the beginning sentence of a story, I felt like my beginning sentences were really lame, so I really wanted something to hook the reader when they first started reading my book, so I had to work on that. And then I was really concerned about who was going to illustrate my book, because I didn't think I could illustrate my book. So I wanted to know if I was going to hire somebody, if I was going to just have somebody volunteer, or if I was going to have a bunch of kids do it for me. And then there was formatting, which was really weird to work with. So I'll talk about that more. So then I met with my mentor, and she told me not to worry about morals, first of all, and helped me figure out what to do about illustrations, and actually told me more about what happens when you illustrate a book. Usually you make a manuscript and then you send it to a publisher, and then they choose an illustrator for you. So it's not really your responsibility to pick an illustrator. It's more the publishing company responsibility, but it's different for everybody. So I had to brainstorm ideas and actually start writing something. So these are some of my first ideas, which I actually settled on a skydiving ant. And I wanted to do something that would work for all kids, because there are a lot of different religious restrictions, and a lot of kids don't really want anything with magic or with holidays in them. So I wanted to do something that could be for everybody. So that's why I had these kinds of ideas. So then I went to my local library and I did some research and I picked out a whole bunch of children's books and I just looked at the beginning sentence. I didn't even read the whole book. And I figured out different kinds of beginning sentences and just sort of went through all of them to pick one for my book. And like a lot of them start off with dialogue and a lot of them, which what I was doing was just naming people, like Sarah, whatever, was going to the playground today. And then there was describing the setting, which in a children's book you have to get the setting and the character sort of in the first like 1 or 2 pages, so that it's, because children's books are quick, so, and you have to keep the attention of the kid, so you have to have a whole lot in the sentences, in the first sentences. And then there was stating the challenge or leading up to the challenge, like Bella wanted a pet, or some people are really good at drawing, but I'm not, you know, so. And then there's the classic Once Upon a Time, which is what I settled on for my story. My illustrator, Miss Elizabeth Dalton, she showed me some sample artwork, and this is actually a part of it. I couldn't fit the whole thing. And I picked her because I know that she's responsible, and this is going to help her project too. So I was really excited, and I really liked her illustrations. And then there was formatting, which I figured out from one of my aunts, that printers actually work. They print in sequences of 8, 16, or 32, or some like multiples of 8. So you have to have a multiple of 8 in a children's book, and usually they are about 500 to 1,000 words. So it's very, very short. And fitting all of the information of a story and having a climax and all of that is, I think one of the quotes was, it's like writing love and war in haiku. So it's a little difficult than I thought it would be. So then these are just qualifying characteristics for children's books. The moral. It has to be something that parents would want their children to learn. I didn't really think about parents when I first started writing, and it was brought out to me from one of my sources that the parents would be reading these books to their kids, and they would be picking them out and buying them. So you have to get something that they would like too. And it can't be said outright. It can't be said, oh, so don't steal, kids, because kids are not, they're not dumb, and they'll figure it out as long as you work it through, and the main character learns and applies it. And I also learned that it's easier to develop a moral after the storyline is written, because you can't just like think about not lying and then write a story around that. You got to write a story and then see the moral in it already, and then just sort of bring it out more. So that's what I did. And everybody knows the story mountain from, preschool education. And there has to be this in a children's book, and like I said, it's a little bit more difficult because it's so short. But there cannot be subplots, like for example, when someone says, "In the meantime, this was happening over here," because, or flashbacks, because that confuses a lot of kids. So you have to have a singular plot, but it also can't be boring. So it is weird. And then there's also the rule of threes, like the Three Little Pigs, or the Three Musketeers, or when Goldilocks was going through the Three Bears stuff, she did everything 3 times. So it happens in a lot of children's stories, and it keeps kids engaged, and they like consistency. So it's something that is good to add into stories. And then all of the questions have to be answered, which is basically what you have to do for every story. You can't just leave a cliffhanger unless you're planning on making a sequel. So yeah. And then the main character, which mine is an ant. He has to be interesting, and usually they have 2 or 3 points that are sort of weird about them and different, but also they have to be relatable. So that you have to actually have like a multi-layer character. You can't just have someone that's inherently good and someone that's inherently bad. It just doesn't work that way, and it's too boring for kids. And then they have to learn and apply the moral, and they have to lead to a conclusion consistent with their own dynamics. So they can't do something that they wouldn't do in their character. I don't really know how to put that. But they can't just go off on some sort of tangent and the ending be sort of weird for their personality. Yeah. And then there was words and illustrations, which I worked a lot on. And I actually, my mentor let me borrow a book called Writing with Pictures. And it helped me a lot with the illustration part of it. Even though I wasn't doing the illustrations, it was nice to know how my words were going to work with the illustrations. So they have to show and not tell. Like, instead of saying, instead of saying they went to fairyland, you would show them in the pictures going to fairyland, and then you would try not to repeat things too much in words and illustrations without purpose. And you can also use repetition to create a sort of rhythm, like the rule of threes. It sort of creates a rhythm. And you do not need to rhyme, which I was really concerned with. Because when you force rhyme, it can be a really bad story. And kids also like words for sounds, like a dog barking, or a person screaming, or I actually have an example of that in my story. And then also the parent factor again. The parents are reading this, so we have to make the words fun for them to read to their kids. So, yeah. Yeah, okay. So, I'm going to read my story now. Oh, okay. Yeah. Once upon a time, there was a colony of ants. These ants worked a lot. They built tunnels, they got food from the outside, and they took care of the queen's babies. Oh, just a note, reading this is a little weird without illustrations, so the tense might be a little weird because I sort of added the illustrator's notes into it. So like when it says like someone said something, it might be weird. But it works with the illustrations, it's not crazy. Okay. But there was one ant who didn't do any of those things. His name was Jack. Jack did something else, something dangerous, something crazy. He liked to skydive. Every day, Jack would run through the tunnels, run outside, run up his favorite tree, and jump. Whoosh! He fell. He fell past a branch. He fell by a floating leaf. He fell dangerously close to the ground. But Jack was safe because he used a parachute. And I'm actually going to stop there because it actually shows all of my examples. Like for the words with sounds, whoosh, he fell. And the rule of threes, he ran through the tunnels, he ran outside, he ran up his favorite tree. So I did that a lot in my story, and I use dialogue a lot too. And so yeah, that's just a sample. If you want more, I can get that to you. So I got a bunch of help from my mentor. I met with my mentor a whole bunch of times, and we bounced ideas off of one another. And she helped me get my first sentence together and get my first pages together. And there are a bunch of drafts that we worked through. And she was super supportive and she built up my self-confidence because I felt that my book wasn't very good, but she said it was, so I trusted her. And then I worked with my illustrator. Like I said, I had illustrator's notes, and I talked with her while writing through all of my drafts so that she could understand what I wanted, but I could also understand what she needed in the story. So, yeah. And then I went to the Longfellow School on Great Cranberry Island, and I read my book to them once I had a good draft. And they told me a whole bunch of things that they liked, but they also gave me a list of things that could be improved. And they said I had a problem with present and past tense, which I did know about, but I wanted to read it to them with both in there so that I could see which one they liked more. And they helped me work through that. And if I had read the story, you would have known that Jack actually ran away, but sort of got away with running away because he wanted to skydive. And he needed to face consequences for not doing his work. So I had to write that in there, which was difficult because my story was a little long, so I had to shorten it up and cut a little bit out so I could put more in. Yeah. So this has taught me to have my work viewed by others and get constructive criticism and not take it so that I get mad at them or get upset, but actually use it and make my story better. And it's also to work with other people, like my illustrator or with my mentor, to get stuff done and to get everything needed all sorted out. I also learned that I love to write, but I would not want to do this as a career because it's very difficult, and I don't think this would support me very well either. But this also did teach me self-confidence in my own work, so I will feel better about my products in the future. And then there are all my sources. And I'd like to say thank you to Carrie Jones, again, and to Miss Dillon and to Elizabeth Dalton, and to the teachers at the Longfellow School and the kids at the school, and all of you guys and the school in general. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take just a few minutes to do some follow-up questions. And I'd like to start off with, would you just repeat your essential question?
Oh, okay.
And then I'd offer to student panelists first to ask some questions if you're interested.
How would this help me to work collaboratively and productively with others?
Okay.
So, yeah.
Are there any student panelists who would have any questions, follow-up?
I have a question. Who's Elizabeth Dalton? Is that a fellow student? Yeah.
She's right behind you.
Okay. So, did she do any illustrations?
No, not yet, actually.
Okay.
Her project is next semester.
Okay.
So I
So she's taking this and doing her own
Yeah.
senior X. Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
How many beginning sentences did you go through?
At least, I would have to say at least 15, probably like 20. I had a whole notebook page in it. It's in my backpack downstairs.
Why? Oh, sorry.
Well, it's students, so I don't know how you're
No,
going
we'll
to do that.
start off with a panelist first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep,
So why was having a moral so important to you in this book? And did you read books that weren't based on a moral that are popular children's books?
Well, I don't know why I focused so much on having a moral. I was really worried about it because I knew that a lot of children's books had them. Actually, most of them do. Yeah, I haven't read one that hasn't had a moral that you could find.
Well, like Olivia and those sort of books, they're not so morally oriented.
Right.
And so that's
I
why,
guess.
you know.
Yeah. I don't know. I was just thinking of like like fairy tale stuff,
Mhm.
and how much morals are built into those.
Yeah.
So that's where my mind went when I thought children's book.
So I'm interested to know why you decided that this would not be a good career for you.
Well, because this one took so long, and I'm not even sure if it would get published or not. So I really like it, but I don't think it would be a solid foundation for me. Like, I would probably do this on the side if I really wanted to, but I wouldn't do this as my main thing just because it's so uncertain. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you had to go through and what the challenges may have been to make the connection with an elementary school and coordinate that exchange, that time with the classes? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I actually went to the school, and it's on Great Cranberry, and my sister goes there.
You matriculated there?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you went and visited because you're not there now.
Right.
Right. Okay.
And I am pretty good friends with both the teachers because there's only there's two main teachers, and then there's like another person that takes care of the kids too, and they both really like me because I graduated in a class of 2 people, so we form a pretty good bond with our teachers. And I just emailed them and said, hey, would it be cool if I read a book to your kids? And they're like, oh yeah, sure, that's awesome, we'd love to have you in. So it wasn't as hard as it would have been if I had thought about it like a bigger school, like in Northeast or something.
So did you read them a draft of your story? Or?
No, I read them what I have for my final draft.
Okay.
So it was actually pretty recent that I went out there, like last month I went there.
And then you had a feedback?
Yeah,
because I'm pushing for collaboration.
Yeah, okay. So I read it to them, and then the teachers asked the kids questions, comments, and concerns.
Mm-hmm.
So we all went around, and they basically said something they liked and something they thought would be cool to improve.
Okay.
So.
And you did mention Elizabeth. What can you just give an overview of your interactions with your possible illustrator?
It's a lot through email and Facebook, and I have a lot of Illustrator's notes. This is actually a readable draft, because it works differently without pictures. So I had a bunch of Illustrator's notes in my draft and shared it with her so that she could look at it and see what I wanted at any time, basically.
Why don't we can take a question from a couple quick questions, and then we'll need to move right along. Go for it.
What was your favorite part about writing it, or just the whole process?
I think going to the school and reading it to them was probably my favorite part, just because they liked it so much.
What is the moral of your story?
Mine is, I mean, with moral, you can almost interpret it any different way. But it's basically just be yourself, but you also have to listen sometimes, so, because you can't just go off and do your own thing. You have to follow some rules, but you should still be yourself sometimes.
Are you going to try and get your book published?
It really depends on whether or not I get illustrations, and I think I will, probably through, what is it, ebook or Amazon? Yeah, which would be a lot easier than mailing it to a publishing company and all of that.
Okay, then with that, I would love to kick all of you out. Have a wrap up.